There are wounds that pierce the soul deeper than any physical pain, especially when that wound is inflicted by the person you loved and trusted most. Until that fateful night, I firmly believed I was the happiest woman in the world. Then the kick from my husband shattered not only the bone in my leg but also my heart and my trust. But in my darkest, most desperate moment, in the clear eyes of my little 4-year-old daughter, I began to see a faint glimmer of light. The drumming of the torrential rain against the window pane echoed the same violent fury as the man standing before me. An excruciating pain that started in my left calf shot up to the crown of my head, preventing me from even screaming. I could only curl up on the cold tile floor, biting my lips until they bled. My vision blurred and lost focus, but the gleaming dress shoes of my husband Ethan, stopped right in front of me, were terrifyingly clear. He bent down, grabbed a fistful of my hair, and my head snapped back without resistance. That handsome face I had loved so much was now contorted with rage red and horribly misshapen. "How dare you talk back to me, you leech? I just asked you for $50,000 for the business and you can't even give me that. I guess you'll be happy when you see me begging on the street." Each of his words was a dagger stabbing into my chest. A leech. I had left my job at a good company to dedicate myself to our daughter Lily and our family, just as he had demanded. I had given him all my savings, even the money from the sale of the apartment my parents left me when we got married, to finance his supposed business. And now, in his eyes, I was nothing more than a leech, fighting back tears I could barely articulate. "Really, Ethan, I don't have any more money. I gave you every last cent I had last month." "Liar," Ethan roared, tightening his grip on my hair. "Didn't your adoptive parents leave you a house when they died? You sold it and kept the money behind my back. Didn't you confess right now? That house was the last legacy from my adoptive parents, but I had also sold it 3 years ago to pay for his supposed heart surgery when he claimed to be sick." He had already forgotten, but I had no strength to explain it again. The pain in my leg was consuming my consciousness. Instinctively, I knew something was very wrong. Besides the sharp pain, I felt nothing else in my leg. Soaked in tears and sweat, I begged desperately, "Please, please stop. My leg hurts so much." Ethan let out a laugh, a chillingly cold smile. He released my hair and my head slammed against the floor. "Let it hurt. Maybe it'll knock some sense into you and cure you of these smart-ass notions." He spat out the cold words, walked over to the sofa, and picked up his cell phone. And then, as if he were a different person, he began to speak in an incredibly sweet and affectionate voice. "Yes, my love, I got the call. I'm just wrapping up a work thing. As soon as I'm done, I'll come see you and our son. Yes, I can't wait to see you. Our son." I felt my heart stop. I couldn't have misheard. Who was he talking to? What son? My mind filled with confusion, and the physical pain was buried under an even greater mental shock. Just then, I heard a muffled sob from the half-open door of my daughter's room. My Lily. How long had she been standing there? The little girl was hiding behind the door, her round eyes filled with tears, terrified, covering her mouth with her small hands to keep from crying out. Seeing her broke my soul in two. She had seen everything. She had witnessed the entire nightmarish scene. Ethan must have heard her too, because he hung up the phone hastily and glared at her. "What are you crying for? Stop making noise and go back to your room. Close the door." Lily shuddered from head to toe, trembling, but she didn't move. She looked at me. Her eyes were full of fear, but at the same time they shone with an intelligence beyond her years. And in that instant, amid the despair, a single spark of hope ignited. I looked at her and, holding back the pain, shook my head slightly. Then, discreetly, I pointed a finger at my cell phone, which was on the end table next to the sofa. My gaze was a desperate plea. I wasn't sure if my 4-year-old daughter could understand my intention, but Lily was much smarter than I thought. She looked back and forth between my finger and me, and blinked. Then she nodded, a gesture so small, only I could see it. Taking advantage of Ethan turning toward the window to light a cigarette, Lily, barefoot and as stealthy as a kitten, crept toward the sofa. My heart was about to burst. "Please don't let him turn around," I prayed silently. As the little girl got near the end table, she pretended to trip, crying out "ouch" and falling forward. My phone, knocked by her hand, landed on the thick rug. "You're so clumsy," Ethan shouted without even turning around. This was the moment. Lily quickly picked up the phone, but instead of putting it back on the table, she clutched it to her chest and slipped under the table out of Ethan's sight. I saw her small, trembling hands tapping the screen. The password was her birth date. I had taught it to her for a possible emergency. The screen lit up and I saw her press the contacts icon. She scrolled through the list with her little finger and stopped at the name I had saved as Grandpa Alex. She brought the phone to her ear, her lips pressed tight. Her voice wouldn't come out. I knew she was terrified, but she was trying with all her might. And finally, I heard my daughter's trembling, broken voice whisper into the receiver a phrase I will never forget. "Grandpa. Grandpa. Mommy. Mommy's gonna die." There was silence on the other end of the line. A second, 2, 3. A silence that felt like an eternity hung in the tense air. I was about to despair, but then a deep, warm, and authoritative voice came through the small speaker. It was a whisper, but strangely clear. "Lily, my sweet girl, you did so well. Can you tell Grandpa where you are now?" The deep, powerful voice of my grandfather on the other end of the phone was like a balm, instantly rescuing me from my paralyzing terror. It was a simple question, but it contained a strange sense of security that made me realize I was no longer alone. I quickly brought my mouth close to the phone my daughter was holding. My voice trembled, but it was much clearer than before. "Grandpa, it's Sophia." With difficulty, I stated the address of that modest apartment in Queens that Ethan had found and that had now become a hell. "Understood." Grandpa's voice showed not the slightest hint of hesitation. "Lock yourselves in a room. Lock the door tight and don't open it for anyone, including your husband. Grandpa is on his way." The call ended, and the screen went dark. Lily looked at me with her tear-filled eyes. She was still scared, but in her gaze a light of hope shone. I hugged her tightly. My heart was still pounding like crazy, but it was no longer from fear. It was from the intense conviction and anticipation that this horrible nightmare was about to end. I carried my daughter to the bathroom and with warm water quickly wiped the tear stains from her face and mine. I had to stay calm. I had to be strong in front of my daughter. I didn't know how or by what means Grandpa would come, but as I had always done since I was a child, I trusted him unconditionally. Time passed with suffocating slowness. Sitting on the bed, hugging my daughter, I strained my ears for any sound from outside. The rain had let up, and all I could hear was the rhythmic dripping of water on the metal fire escape. About 20 minutes later, a strange sound came from the street entrance. It wasn't the sound of a normal car. It was the deep rumble of the engines of several high-end black SUVs entering the narrow street. Then the sharp screech of brakes and the decisive thud of doors closing. My heart leaped. It was Grandpa. It had to be him. Before I could react, I heard the firm footsteps of several people approaching our building's entrance. They were nothing like Ethan's. They were rhythmic, imposing with an intimidating air. Just then, the door of the apartment across the hall flew open, and the shrill voice of our landlady was heard. "What's all this racket at this time of night? Who are you looking for?" But her voice was cut off, immediately replaced by a gasp of surprise. Curious, I peeked through the peephole and was left speechless by the scene unfolding. In front of the landlady was not one person, but 4 burly men dressed in black suits with impassive expressions like something out of a movie. And in the center of them was my grandfather. He was no longer the image of the kindly grandfather I remembered. He wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, his back straight, leaning on an ebony cane with a silver handle. His hair was completely white, but his eyes shone with a light so piercing and authoritative that no one would dare look him directly in the eye. "Where is Sophia's apartment?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud, but its weight was such that even the normally haughty landlady trembled as she pointed to our door. Grandpa nodded, gave a signal, and 2 of the bodyguards immediately approached our door. "Sophia, it's Grandpa. Open the door." Hearing his familiar voice, I rushed to open it. As soon as the door swung open, I couldn't hold back anymore and collapsed, crying into his arms. "Grandpa!" He hugged me tightly, patting my trembling back with his warm hand. "It's okay, it's all over now. Grandpa's here. No one will ever hurt you again." Just then, we heard the sound of Ethan's motorcycle at the end of the street. He must have finished talking to his lover and was returning to play the role of the attentive husband. Seeing the luxury SUVs blocking the street and the men in black in front of the door, his face turned white as a sheet. He parked the motorcycle haphazardly and ran toward us, shouting, "What's going on? Who are you people?" Seeing me in Grandpa's arms, his confusion turned to anger and surprise. "Sophia, who is this old man?" he shouted, pointing rudely at my grandfather. My grandfather turned slowly. His eyes sharp as blades pierced through Ethan. His gaze was so cold it seemed to freeze the air. "So you're Ethan, my granddaughter's husband. So what? Who do you think you are barging into someone's home, Ethan?" Still not realizing who he was dealing with, maintained his aggressive attitude. "Who I am is not important." Grandpa's voice was deep and grave. "What's important is what you just did to my granddaughter." As he finished speaking, Grandpa's gaze fell on my swollen leg. One of the bodyguards at his side understood the signal instantly and stepped forward. His voice was as cold as ice. Ethan Thompson, you're under arrest for domestic assault. You need to come with us. What domestic assault? Don't be ridiculous, you have no proof, Ethan began to shout nervously. The proof is the injuries on my granddaughter's body, Grandpa said, and the distress call from my great-granddaughter. Isn't that enough? Ethan was speechless, pale as a ghost. He looked at me, then at Lily, who was hiding behind me. In his eyes was an expression of disbelief. He had never imagined that the daughter he ignored would be the one to ruin everything. Since he couldn't speak, 2 bodyguards approached and held him firmly by the arms. What are you doing? Let me go, Sophia, say something. Do you want to see your husband in jail? He screamed, struggling desperately. I just looked at him in silence. In my eyes, there was not a shred of affection left, only contempt and cold indifference. Grandpa signaled to another bodyguard, who immediately handed a thick envelope of cash to the landlady. This should be enough to cover the rent that man owes you and to compensate for the trouble. From now on, what happened here never happened. Understood, the landlady, seeing the envelope, her eyes widened and she nodded repeatedly. Yes, of course. I didn't see anything. I don't know anything. Everything was resolved quickly and cleanly. Grandpa turned to me and in his warm voice again said, Come on, little one, let's go home. Grandpa lifted Lily into his arms. The little girl, feeling completely safe, hid her face in his chest. Another bodyguard helped me walk. They led me to one of the luxury SUVs. Inside, a woman in a white coat was waiting. She's the family doctor, Grandpa explained. She'll give you first aid. The car started slowly, leaving behind the modest apartment and a violent husband being taken away by the police. I looked out the window. The New York City night still glittered with its dazzling lights, but in my heart a great storm had just begun. And at the end of this road I would find not only the truth but also a family and a sanctuary I had never dared to dream of. The luxury SUV glided through the city night. The ride was so smooth you could barely feel the movement. A world of difference from the crowded buses or Ethan's old motorcycle I was used to. Inside the car, the doctor gently cleaned and bandaged the wounds on my leg. Fortunately, there was no fracture, but there was severe soft tissue damage that would require rest for some time. Lily, exhausted by the extreme fear, had fallen fast asleep in her great-grandfather's arms. Seeing her angelic sleeping face squeezed my heart again. If it hadn't been for Lily's call, what would have become of us tonight? I looked at the man sitting next to me, the one my daughter called Grandpa. In my vague memories, the figure of my grandfather was nothing more than blurry fragments. I was abandoned in an orphanage at birth, and adopted by a kind couple of civil servants. Though not wealthy, our home was always filled with love. My adoptive father, Frank Peterson, was an engineer at a construction company. He was a man of few words, but he adored his wife and daughter. My adoptive mother, Maria Larson, was a grade school teacher. She was always very affectionate with me and taught me right from wrong. I loved them and was as grateful to them as if they were my real parents. And in the memories of that happy childhood, a special man sometimes appeared, someone my parents always respectfully called Mr. Sterling. Back then, Alexander Alex Sterling was the president of the construction group where my adoptive father worked and his best friend. I remember him coming to our house on Christmas loaded with gifts. He had no children and had been widowed young, so he had a special affection for me. I would sit on his lap, he would stroke my hair, and he used to say, "This little girl is so smart and bright. She's sure to become someone important when she grows up." His gaze was always warm and loving. He also paid for my entire education from private school through college, saying that investing in education was never a bad investment. My adoptive parents refused at first, but he insisted he just wanted to do something for his beloved granddaughter. Tragedy struck when I was in my senior year of college. My adoptive parents, who were on a work trip, died in an unexpected car accident. My world collapsed. In my moment of greatest despair, it was Mr. Sterling who handled all the funeral arrangements and comforted and encouraged me. "Your parents are gone, but you still have me. From now on, consider me your family." Afterward, Grandpa helped me get a stable job in one of the group's subsidiaries. My life slowly regained stability, and the sadness began to fade. And then, I met Ethan. He was a new employee in the sales department, 2 years older than me. He was tall, handsome, well-spoken, and always seemed ambitious. He told me about his difficult childhood and how hard he had fought to get where he was. I, longing for a place to lean on amid the pain of losing my family, fell completely for his apparent sincerity and determination. We fell in love. I still remember perfectly Grandpa's look the first time I introduced him to Ethan. He didn't say much, just observed him in silence. That night he called me to his office. "Sophia," he said gravely, That young man seems smart, but his eyes aren't honest. I can't interfere in your love life, but be careful. You never know what's in a person's heart. At that moment, blinded by love, I paid no attention to his warning. I thought he was being overly suspicious and that Ethan was a good person. I even justified it by thinking that perhaps his humble background made him seem a bit reserved. Mr. Sterling just sighed and said no more. We got married a year later. Mr. Sterling gave me a luxurious apartment on the Upper East Side and a considerable sum of money as a dowry, saying it was the inheritance my adoptive parents had saved for me. After the wedding, Ethan said he didn't want to live off my family and wanted to start his own business. He showed me a very convincing business plan. I, trusting my husband, completely gave him without hesitation all my savings and the money from the sale of the apartment Grandpa had given me. When Lily was born, Ethan said I should stay home to take care of the baby while he handled the finances. Once again, I followed his advice, and that was the beginning of my tragedy. Ethan's business didn't seem to be doing well. He constantly complained about difficulties and asked for more money. I had nothing left to give him. I could only encourage him. Slowly, his attitude began to change. He became irritable and often yelled at me. The arguments became more frequent, and finally he started hitting me. At first only when he was drunk, but then it became a habit. He used me as a punching bag whenever things didn't go his way. I endured it all for my daughter and for the faint hope that he might change. I didn't dare tell Mr. Sterling. I was afraid of worrying him and having him be disappointed in my choice. I kept all the pain to myself. Until tonight, when everything went over the limit, the car stopped in front of an imposing classic-style mansion with a large garden in Greenwich, Connecticut. It was Mr. Sterling's residence since his retirement, a place I had visited very few times. Upon entering, the quiet and solemn atmosphere of the house calmed me in a strange way. Mr. Sterling led us to a spacious room on the second floor. This was your adoptive mother's room, he said. From now on, this is your home. I looked around. Everything was meticulously cared for. On the desk, a photo of my adoptive parents smiling happily was still in its place. The tears started to flow again. After so many years, I had come home. That night, for the first time in years, I was able to sleep soundly without nightmares of violence, without insults. I slept peacefully, surrounded by the love of my family, and I knew that starting tomorrow, a new life and a new fight would begin. And this time, I wouldn't fight alone. The next morning, I woke to the sun's rays streaming through the large window, painting warm rectangles of light on the hardwood floor. The pain in my leg was still sharp, but my mind was strangely clear and refreshed. Lily was still sleeping soundly beside me. It was probably the first time she had slept peacefully after so much fear. I got out of bed carefully, trying not to make a sound. Seeing myself in the large vanity mirror, I was startled. The woman in the mirror looked haggard. Swollen eyes, a pale face, and a faint bruise on her cheek, a reminder of Ethan's slap from the night before. But deep within that exhausted gaze, a flame of rage and determination was beginning to burn. I couldn't go on living like this. I had to change for myself, and for my daughter. I showered and put on the clean loungewear one of the housekeepers had prepared for me. When I went down to the dining room, I found a lavish breakfast spread on the table. Grandpa was reading the newspaper, and next to him sat a middle-aged man with a very intellectual look, wearing glasses and an impeccable suit. Seeing me come down, Grandpa smiled. His kind smile had returned to his face. "Did you rest well, my girl? Come sit down for breakfast. This is Mr. Davies. He's my personal attorney and my most trusted friend." I nodded to greet Mr. Davies. He stood up as well and shook my hand politely. "Miss Sophia, good morning. The chairman has already brought me up to speed. I'm very sorry for what happened, but I'm glad you're out of there." During breakfast, the atmosphere was not at all heavy. Grandpa and Mr. Davies delicately asked about my situation, but without probing the wound. They talked about future plans, Lily's education, and even travel destinations that might soothe my spirit. They were helping me look forward. After breakfast, we retreated to Grandpa's study. The floor-to-ceiling shelves were filled with new and old books. The air in the room was solemn and intellectual. Sophia, Grandpa began, his voice now serious. "This is not the time for regrets. We need to act, and fast." Mr. Davies continued, opening his briefcase and taking out a stack of papers. "Miss Sophia, following the chairman's instructions, we have conducted a preliminary investigation into Ethan Thompson's situation. The first thing we must do is immediately freeze all assets held jointly in both your names to prevent him from diverting funds." "Joint assets? That's impossible. We have nothing left. I gave him all the money I had for his business." Mr. Davies offered a professional smile. Not necessarily. Legally, you are still married, so we must review everything again. Furthermore, we need to trace where the money you gave him actually went. Grandpa nodded. Exactly. That scoundrel couldn't have simply failed at a business. There has to be more to it. Davies investigate all his financial movements for the last 3 years. Leave no stone unturned. Of course, Mr. Chairman, replied Mr. Davies. We've had someone watching him since last night. He's been released on bail, and strangely, he doesn't seem worried or nervous at all. In fact, just this morning, one of our men saw him at a luxury cafe with a woman. Hearing that, my heart skipped a beat. Who is that woman? My voice trembled slightly. We are verifying her identity, but one thing is certain. Their relationship did not seem like that of mere acquaintances. Mr. Davies showed me a photo taken from a distance. It wasn't very clear, but Ethan could be seen sitting very close to a woman, his hand affectionately over hers. And here's the important part, Mr. Davies continued. Right after you left the apartment, he went back there. Our man heard him on the phone saying in a very irritated voice, "The plan has gone sideways. That stupid bitch isn't as simple as I thought. We'll have to find another way." The plan. The stupid bitch. He was clearly referring to me, to us, and to Grandpa. So everything that had happened last night wasn't just a fit of Ethan's rage. It was part of a plan I knew nothing about. With every passing minute, everything became more complicated and terrifying. "One more thing, Miss Sophia," said Mr. Davies. "Legally, we have more than enough evidence to charge him with domestic assault. But to secure custody of little Lily and make him pay a higher price, we need more evidence to prove he is an unfit father and has committed other illegal acts." Grandpa looked at me, his gaze firm. "Sophia, I know this is going to be very hard for you, but you have to be strong. This is your fight. Do you want to get a divorce, get some alimony, and let it be? Or do you want to see this through to the end, expose that man's true face, and get justice for the years you've suffered?" I looked at Grandpa, then at Mr. Davies. The flame of anger and determination inside me burned furiously. I had already lost too much. I couldn't afford to lose my daughter, and I couldn't stand the thought of the man who had destroyed my life getting away with it. I want to see this through to the end. My voice no longer trembled. It was strangely firm. I want him to pay for everything. Grandpa nodded, satisfied. "Well," said my girl, "then let's begin our plan." Throughout the day, I remained in the study with Grandpa and Mr. Davies. They laid out a detailed step-by-step plan. I, who had been a passive victim, was now part of the plan, a crucial axis in the legal and psychological war to come. I knew the road would be tough, but I was no longer afraid. Now behind me, there was not a cold wall of loneliness, but a gigantic empire ready to protect and support me. Over the following days, I set aside my personal pain and focused on the plan laid out by Grandpa and Mr. Davies. The Greenwich Mansion became our headquarters. Every day, Mr. Davies would come to report on the situation and analyze new information. I, who had been a simple housewife, began to familiarize myself with legal and financial terms I had never heard before. I avidly read the documents Mr. Davies brought me, trying to understand every aspect of the war I was facing. Grandpa did not participate directly in the investigation, but he set the strategic direction and used his extensive network of contacts to support us. His calm and wisdom were my emotional anchor. As the first and most crucial step, Mr. Davies, on my behalf, applied to the court for an emergency freeze on all bank accounts in our names. Simultaneously, he filed a request with the relevant agencies to prohibit any sale or transfer of related assets. It was a preemptive strike to cut off Ethan's retreat and prevent him from diverting the remaining assets. As expected, this measure turned him into a cornered beast. He wouldn't stop calling and sending me messages. At first, with sweet words begging me to withdraw the complaint. "Sophia, why are you doing this? Why did you freeze the accounts? I need the money urgently for a project. If you do this, you're killing me." When I didn't respond, he changed tactics and resorted to threats. "Fine. So you think you're so brave now that you have that old man protecting you? Listen to me carefully, don't push me to the edge. If you do, neither you nor your daughter will get out of this unscathed." Far from scaring me, these messages only fueled my rage. I forwarded all of them to Mr. Davies. They became compelling evidence of his violent and petty nature. Meanwhile, Mr. Davies's team worked with astonishing efficiency. In just 3 days, they brought the first results of the investigation. Mr. Davies spread a stack of papers on the large mahogany desk in Grandpa's study. "Mr. Chairman, Miss Sophia, we have our first lead." He pointed to a thick bank statement. "This is the history of the transfers you, Miss Sophia, made to Ethan Thompson's account over the last 3 years. The total exceeds $500,000. It's not a small amount. I looked at the figures printed on the paper and felt a pang in my chest. $500,000. It was all my savings, and the money from the sale of my adoptive parents' house. I had given him everything without a second thought, and in return I had received the bitterest of betrayals. And here's the important part. Mr. Davies turned to another page. All this money after entering Mr. Thompson's account was not invested in any construction project as he claimed. Instead, it was divided and moved through several accounts in a complex web, and finally it all flowed into a single account. He circled a name on the statement. This account belongs to a legal entity called Golden Future Investments and Development, LLC. Golden Future? I frowned. I had never heard that name. That's normal, said Mr. Davies. This company was incorporated about 3 years ago, coinciding with the time Mr. Thompson started talking about starting a business. And the legal representative of this company is not him. He passed another document. It was a simple printout from the state's business registry. I held my breath and looked at the section for the administrator. An unknown name appeared. Isabella Rossi. Who is Isabella Rossi? Grandpa asked in his deep, powerful voice. She's the woman Ethan Thompson met at the cafe the other day. Mr. Davies pulled out a clearer photo. In it, a woman in her late 20s, beautiful and sophisticated, was smiling affectionately next to Ethan. It all became clear. There was no business project. Golden Future was a shell company, a front to legally appropriate my money. With my money, he had set up a company for his mistress, building a golden future for them. A future built on my sacrifice and my tears. A cold anger rose within me. He had not only cheated on me emotionally, he had completely defrauded me. And where is this company's headquarters? I asked in a firm voice. The registered address is in a top-tier office building on Park Avenue, but our people went there and they only rent a virtual office with almost no activity. However, we have located the apartment where this Isabella Rossi lives. It's a luxurious duplex in a high-end complex in the Soho district, said Mr. Davies. Grandpa, who had remained silent until then, spoke up. A sharp glint appeared in his eyes. Davies dig deeper into this woman, Isabella Rossi. Her past, her connections, everything. I want to know everything. And keep monitoring that Ethan's movements. I fear this is not just a case of adultery and fraud. Yes, Mr. Chairman. Grandpa's words sent a shiver down my spine. He was right. How could a young woman like Isabella Rossi have orchestrated such an elaborate scam with Ethan? Was there someone else behind her? And was Ethan a violent and greedy man smart enough to devise all this? The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, but they pointed to a conspiracy, and questions far bigger than I could have ever imagined. I sensed that this fight was going to be much more complex and dangerous than I thought. The wait over the next few days felt like an eternity. With each passing day, my heart burned with impatience. I worried about my own fate, but most of all, I worried about Lily. The child was too young to understand the storm that had descended upon our family. She just wondered why she couldn't see her father, why her mother always seemed sad. I had to hug her and lie, telling her that Daddy had gone on a very long business trip. Every time I lied, it felt like a knife twisting in my heart. While I struggled with a tangle of emotions, Mr. Davies' team and the private investigators hired by Grandpa worked tirelessly. Like industrious bees, they collected drop by drop the nectar of truth in a world full of traps and lies. One afternoon, Mr. Davies called me. His voice was more serious than usual. Miss Sophia, could you come to my office right now? We have some new discoveries, and I think it would be best for you to see them yourself. A bad feeling washed over me. I left Lily with one of the housekeepers and quickly headed to Mr. Davies' office in the city center. His office was on the top floor of a skyscraper with a spectacular view of Manhattan. But at that moment, no matter how dazzling the city was, everything looked gray to my eyes. Mr. Davies was already waiting for me in the conference room. On the large table were several folders and a laptop. Please sit down, he said quietly. What you are about to see may be quite shocking. You need to prepare yourself. I nodded, clenching my hands in my lap. Tell me. I can handle whatever it is. Mr. Davies sighed. He turned the laptop screen toward me. We've investigated Isabella Rossi further. She is not a simple woman. Ostensibly, she is the director of a startup company, but in reality, she has a rather complex past. And most importantly, she and Ethan Thompson have known each other for a long time. He pressed the play button. Several photos appeared on the screen. The first was of Ethan and Isabella Rossi, walking hand in hand on a beach in Mallorca. The date on the photo was from about 3 years ago, just a few months after I had sold my adoptive parents' house to pay for Ethan's supposed heart surgery. So the heart condition had also been a lie, a sham, to get the last big chunk of money I had left. That money had been used for a vacation with his mistress to start a new life. A heavy stone in my chest made it hard to breathe, but that wasn't the worst of it. Mr. Davies moved to the next photos. They were from the last 2 years, moments that by right should have been mine and my daughter's. Ethan tenderly feeding a chubby baby boy. Ethan patiently teaching the child to walk in a luxurious apartment. Ethan, Isabella, and the boy blowing out birthday candles, smiling radiantly. The image of this new family was so perfect and happy it hurt. Who is that child? My voice trembled uncontrollably. That is Ethan Thompson and Isabella Rossi's son. Mr. Davies's voice had also turned grave. His name is Mason. He is over 2 years old. Ethan Thompson has been deceiving you and leading a double life. Mason, I repeated the name in my head. Even the name of his hidden son was similar to our daughter Lily's. His cruelty knew no bounds. So that was it. That was the true face of the devoted husband I had supported by sacrificing everything. He hadn't just been unfaithful. He had a second family. He was the father of another child. The money I had saved and borrowed to give him wasn't for a business, but to support his second wife. I had been turned into a cash cow, diligently working for the happiness of others. This truth was more painful than any beating. It was an insult, a humiliation to me and to all my love. I sat there motionless. The tears fell endlessly, but this time they were not tears of weakness. They were for my stupidity, for my completely stolen youth. Miss Sophia, Mr. Davies offered me a tissue. I know this is hard to accept, but we have to face it. This evidence is a fatal blow. With the fact that he had a child and deliberately hid it, we can prove without a doubt that he has gravely violated his marital and family duties. The court in the division of assets and in the custody of Lily will be on your side. I wiped my tears and lifted my head. My gaze had turned as cold as steel. He won't just lose custody, Mr. Davies, I said firmly. I want him to also pay for the crimes of fraud and embezzlement. I want him and that woman to be socially destroyed. Mr. Davies nodded. That is precisely the next step of our plan. He passed another folder. The company they have, Golden Future, is not just a front for money laundering. They are also involved in several illegal business activities. We are currently gathering more evidence of tax evasion and commercial fraud. The net is closing, Miss Sophia. I left the lawyer's office as the city lights began to twinkle on. I felt empty but filled with determination. All the love and attachment for that man had completely vanished. Now inside me there was only a mother ready to fight for justice for her future and for her daughters. I could not lose this battle. While my team and I quietly and methodically closed the legal net around Ethan and his mistress, they on the other side seemed unaware of the approaching storm, or perhaps overconfidence blinded them. After several days of being unable to contact me and seeing his bank accounts frozen, Ethan began to realize the situation was not as simple as he thought. He could no longer play the part of the misunderstood, victimized husband. He decided to play his last card, one he believed would make a sentimental and loyal woman like me soften and give in. His mother. My mother-in-law. One morning, while I was playing with Lily in the garden, one of the housekeepers came running to inform me. Ma'am, there's an older woman at the gate saying she's your mother-in-law and she's causing a scene. My heart sank. My mother-in-law. How long had it been since I'd seen her? After the wedding, she had only come to our house a couple of times. She was a simple woman from a small town, but her love for her son was so immense that she was harsh and demanding with her daughter-in-law. In her eyes, her son Ethan was always the best, and all his mistakes were forgivable. I sensed that her visit was not to ask how I was. Let her in, I told the housekeeper calmly. I took Lily in my arms, asked her to go play with her grandparents, and headed to the living room alone. I wanted to face her by myself. As soon as she saw me, my mother-in-law ran towards me, but not to hit or scold me. She fell to her knees at my feet and burst into tears. Oh, Sophia, my dear, how can you be so cruel? Do you want to kill my Ethan? I was taken aback by her sudden performance. It was a completely unexpected drama. All the household staff were watching us curiously. Carol, please get up. Tell me calmly what's wrong. I tried to lift her, but she refused, clinging to my legs. No, I won't get up until you promise to forgive my Ethan. He's my only son. If anything happens to him, what will become of me? She began to plead in a pitiful voice. She said Ethan had been devastated since I left him, that he wasn't eating or sleeping, just drinking, and that his business was at a standstill. That he loved me very much, and that everything he had done was to give me a better life, that he had simply lost his temper due to stress. He was wrong to hit you. I'm not going to justify it. But after he did it, his heart was broken too. He's sorry now. You're his wife. How can you push your own husband into the abyss? You block his accounts, you report him, and you want to put him in jail. If he goes to jail, who will take care of our Lily? Who will be responsible for her future? Each of her words targeted my weak points, the marital bond, the child's future. She painted Ethan as a responsible, repentant husband and father on the verge of losing everything over a momentary mistake. Her performance was so perfect that if I hadn't had those photos and recordings, I might have fallen for it. But now I could only laugh to myself. I calmly pulled away from her hands and took a step back. I stared at the woman acting in front of me. Carol, my voice was cold and unfamiliar. You don't need to continue this act. That drama doesn't work on me anymore. My mother-in-law was startled and abruptly stopped crying. She looked up at me from the floor. Her eyes no longer held sadness but surprise and anger. What are you saying? Go back and tell your son that if he's truly sorry, he should go to the courthouse and confess everything. If he plans to continue with this charade, we'll see each other in court. You, my mother-in-law, leaped to her feet. The image of a helpless woman had vanished. She finally showed her true colors. You shameless, venomous snake, I curse the day my Ethan married someone like you. You think because you have money and connections you can trample on our family? You'll see you won't get away with this. She started spewing all sorts of insults and curses I had never heard from her, but they no longer hurt me. I just watched her in silence as if I were watching a cheap soap opera. Please call someone from security. Escort this lady out. 2 bodyguards immediately approached and escorted her out. She struggled and screamed, but she was no match for 2 burly men. You'll regret this, you bitch. I swear I won't stand by and do nothing. Her voice could still be heard even from outside the gate. The house returned to calm, but a storm was brewing inside me. My mother-in-law's drama had failed, but it had made one thing clear. They wouldn't give up. Greed and selfishness were ingrained in their very bones. They wouldn't hesitate to use any despicable means to achieve their ends. And I knew that after this sentimental farce, a more vicious attack would follow. I had to be ready for anything. This fight wasn't just legal. It was a war of psychology and reputation. My mother-in-law's failed theatrics made me realize I couldn't remain on the defensive. Waiting for them to attack and then defending myself would always put me in a passive position. It was time to transform myself, to present myself to them and to the world with a completely different image. I was no longer Sophia, the submissive, weak wife. I had to become Sophia Sterling, the vice president of the Sterling Group, an authoritative, self-assured woman whom no one would dare underestimate. This transformation wasn't just to teach Ethan and his family a lesson. It was to reclaim myself, to rediscover the essence I had lost in the darkness of my hellish marriage. I started with my appearance. I stopped wearing simple, neutral-colored loungewear. Grandpa summoned the best stylists and designers in New York to the mansion. They brought the latest collections from the most exclusive luxury brands. I tried on everything from flowing silk dresses to impeccably tailored power suits and dazzling evening gowns. With each change of clothes, I felt myself becoming a different person. My long hair, which I always wore in a ponytail, was transformed by expert hands into a voluminous mane with sophisticated ash-brown waves. Makeup artists worked on my face with care without excess. They used makeup to erase the fatigue, highlight my features, and give me an air of intellectual authority. When I looked in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. The woman in the mirror was a stranger yet deeply familiar. She was the person I should have always been. A profound, intense, and dazzling confidence began to bloom from within. But the biggest change wasn't external. It was my way of thinking and acting. I started to get fully involved in the group's affairs. I was no longer a mere assistant in meetings. I took the initiative to study projects, read financial reports, and understand the situation of each subsidiary. The knowledge from college that I thought was forgotten resurfaced, and combined with life's bitter experiences, gave me a deeper, more realistic view of the business world. I began to voice my opinions and proposals in meetings. At first, there were some skeptical glances, especially from the older executives who had been serving Grandpa for years. They probably still saw me as the privileged granddaughter. But I wasn't discouraged. I convinced them with figures, logical analysis, and sharp arguments. Gradually, they began to look at me differently with genuine respect. Grandpa watched my transformation. He didn't say much, but his eyes were filled with pride. He started assigning me more important tasks involving me in negotiations with key partners. The business world is the fiercest battlefield, he told me. It will make you stronger and tougher than any university. And he was right. Every negotiation, every professional challenge was a valuable lesson. I learned to stay calm under pressure, to read others' intentions, to make firm and precise decisions. My confidence no longer came from Grandpa's backing, but from my own ability and effort. I was no longer intimidated by inquisitive stares, nor did I tremble when speaking in public. I had found my own voice. My transformation wasn't limited to work. I began to rebuild my social life. I attended industry parties and charity events. I presented myself with a completely new image, an elegant, beautiful, intelligent, and charismatic businesswoman. The media stopped referring to me as the victim of a high-profile divorce and started talking about the princess returning to the Sterling Empire, the new rising star of the business world. I knew all of this would reach Ethan's ears. I wanted him to see it. I wanted him to know that the woman he had abandoned and scorned was now in a position he could never reach. I wanted him to regret it, but on a deeper level, this transformation was for me. It was a declaration that my life could not be ruined by a pathetic man. I deserved a better life, a brighter future, and I was going to build it with my own hands. It was time for the phoenix burned in the flames of betrayal to rise from the ashes more beautiful and stronger than ever. About a month after officially starting at the group, my life had completely changed. My days were filled with work meetings and business trips. This activity was the best remedy for forgetting the pain and focusing on the future. My image as vice president of the Sterling Group appeared more and more in the media. I was sure Ethan and his family saw and knew all this, but strangely, they were completely silent. No calls, no messages, no scandals. This silence made me a little uneasy. Were they plotting something, or had they really been scared into submission? Whatever it was, I couldn't let my guard down. I asked Mr. Davies' team to continue gathering evidence and preparing for the upcoming trial. One Saturday afternoon, after a stressful week, I decided to treat myself to a relaxing afternoon. I wanted to buy some gifts for Lily. She had a school performance coming up, and I wanted my daughter to be the prettiest one there. I drove the white convertible sports car Grandpa had given me and headed to a luxury department store in the city center. I no longer felt self-conscious or out of place as I had before. I walked with confidence. The elegance of a lady had become my second skin. I was in a high-end children's clothing boutique choosing a pink princess dress for Lily when I heard a familiar, sharp voice behind me. Well, well, look who we have here. If it isn't the Madam Vice President. You look pretty good driving fancy cars and coming to places like this. I turned around, and there she was, none other than Isabella Rossi, Ethan's mistress. But she wasn't alone. Clinging affectionately to her arm was Ethan himself. He looked thinner and more haggard, but the suit he wore was still designer. Seeing me, a flicker of surprise and awkwardness crossed his eyes, but he quickly hid it behind a mask of cold indifference. But Isabella was different. She scanned me from head to toe with an envy and hostility she didn't bother to hide. Her belly was quite swollen, and she displayed it defiantly as if to show off. What's the matter? Surprised to see us? Did you think you could ban us from places like this? Of course, a woman like you, who's probably only ever been to flea markets, it's normal for you to be amazed. I said nothing, just a faint smile. I wasn't going to lower myself to argue with someone like her. My silence seemed to infuriate her even more. Ethan, look at this. Now that she's a vice president, she ignores us. She leaned on Ethan's arm, pouting. Or maybe she's still bitter that you left her. Of course. How can an old woman who can't even give you a son hold on to a man? Are you finished? This time, I didn't stay quiet. I looked Isabella directly in the eyes and said in a voice that wasn't loud but was as cold as ice, I don't have time to take life lessons from a mistress like you. So would you mind stepping aside? What? How dare you? Who's the mistress? Isabella's face flushed with anger. I'm Ethan's fiancée and the mother of his child. The one who doesn't belong here is you. She tried to lunge at me, but Ethan stopped her. That's enough, Isabella. Don't make a scene here. Ethan's voice sounded tired. He looked at me with a complex expression. Sophia, we don't have to be like this. It's all in the past. Yes, it's in the past, I replied. So, control your woman. Keep her from barking around and bothering people. With that, I took the dress I had chosen and went to the checkout. Deliberately, I took out the black Amex card Grandpa had given me, a symbol of unlimited power. The sales associate, upon seeing the card, instantly changed her attitude and treated me with reverence. Isabella and Ethan turned pale at the scene. I knew this display was a bit childish, but it was necessary. I had to show them that the tables had completely turned. After paying with the shopping bag in hand, I left the store without looking back at them. I walked past them as if they were two insignificant strangers. But when I had taken a few steps, Ethan suddenly called out, "Sophia, wait a moment." I stopped, but I didn't turn around. I heard his footsteps approaching. I know I was wrong. His voice had a hint of pleading. "But please don't ruin my life. The company is on the brink of bankruptcy. If you just said a word to your grandfather, couldn't you help me?" I turned slowly. I looked him in the eyes, and a mocking smile formed on my lips. "Ruin your life, you say? Do you remember what you and your family tried to do to me? Steal my inheritance, take my daughter away? Compared to what you did, your company going bankrupt is nothing. But it was everything I had, and my youth, my sacrifices. Who compensates me for that?" I interrupted him sharply. "Consider yourself lucky. I'm leaving it at this. Don't test my patience. Or the next place you'll be going won't be the stock market, but to jail." My words were like a bucket of cold water on Ethan. He turned white as a sheet. He took a step back, unable to say anything. I didn't want to waste another second on him. I turned decisively and walked away, leaving him standing there stunned in the middle of the crowd. This unexpected encounter had been unpleasant, but it had made one thing clear. Ethan was scared. Very scared. He was sinking, and I felt that the day of getting my daughter back was not far off. The encounter at the department store confirmed that Ethan was in real trouble. The termination of all contracts with the Sterling Group had been a fatal blow to Golden Future. Other investors began to withdraw their funds, and partners canceled their agreements. The ship he and Isabella had painstakingly built at the cost of my money was about to sink. But a cornered beast is the most dangerous. Instead of admitting defeat, Ethan decided to make one last gamble. He organized a grand party at a 5-star hotel. Officially, it was a client appreciation party and a presentation to attract investors for a new, innovative tech project. In reality, it was a desperate attempt to save his company and lure more naive investors. This information reached me through Mr. Davies's network. Upon hearing it, a bold idea formed in my mind. Instead of just watching his performance, why not turn his stage into his final judgment? I immediately consulted with Grandpa and Mr. Davies. "It's a golden opportunity." Mr. Davies's eyes lit up. Investors, partners, and the press all gathered in one place. If we expose his true face right there, the impact will be 1,000 times greater than in a cold courtroom. He will be socially annihilated with no room for excuses. Grandpa agreed, but expressed a slight concern. "Isn't this plan too risky? What if that cornered man tries to harm you?" "Don't worry, Grandpa," I said confidently. "I won't go alone. We will prepare everything perfectly. This will be the final act." The plan was meticulously crafted. As a first step through a third party, I posed as a venture capital fund from Singapore interested in Ethan's innovative project. I had my intermediaries promise him an investment of $35 million. For the current Ethan, that amount was a lifeline from heaven. He took the bait without hesitation. Elated, he sent all the detailed project information and the company presentation to the supposed investment fund. He had no idea that all that material was being analyzed by the experts at the Sterling Group, becoming more evidence of his fraud. As a second step, I informed him that the representative of the investment fund would attend the party to officially sign the agreement. This news made Ethan even more excited and confident. He spent the little money he had left preparing a lavish party to impress the investors. He even invited the former partners who had turned their backs on him, intending to regain his prestige. He also invited journalists from several major media outlets, hoping the event would be the platform for his spectacular comeback. He didn't know that all those guests would become the audience for his downfall. The night of the party, the 5-star hotel glittered with dazzling lights. The ballroom was bustling with activity. Ethan and Isabella greeted guests at the entrance with confident smiles. They looked like a power couple at the peak of success. Isabella wore a form-fitting evening gown, deliberately showing off her advanced pregnancy. She moved through the room, laughing and chatting with guests, acting as the true hostess. When the party was at its peak, the grand doors of the ballroom suddenly opened. I walked in. My appearance momentarily silenced the room. All eyes were on me. I wore a black evening gown, simple in design but extremely elegant. The form-fitting dress and my hair styled in a high chignon revealed my slender neck and sparkling diamond jewelry. I wore bold makeup that highlighted my red lips and a sharp gaze. Beside me was Grandpa, and behind him Mr. Davies and 2 bodyguards. The appearance of the chairman of the Sterling Group surprised people even more, and the whispers grew louder. Ethan and Isabella, upon seeing us, their smiles froze. The color drained from Ethan's face. He hurried over, stammering, Mr. Sterling. Sophia, what are you doing here? I smiled. I knew it was a smile that would chill him to the bone. Can't we be here, I heard? Golden Future has an important event today, and that a major investor from Singapore is coming. As a businesswoman, I couldn't miss such a great learning opportunity. But we didn't send you an invitation. Oh, really? I held up the golden invitation I had in my hand. And what is this? I suppose one of your employees made a mistake. Ethan was speechless. He knew I was provoking him on purpose, but in front of so many people, and especially in front of Grandpa, he could do nothing. He had to force a smile and lead us to the VIP table he had prepared. The party continued, but the atmosphere had completely changed. All attention was no longer on the host Ethan, but on our table. People began to whisper, making all sorts of guesses about my reappearance. A reconciliation or a public warning? The trap was set, and the stage was ready. I sat calmly, sipped my glass of wine, and watched Ethan's face full of anxiety and confusion. The best play, the final and most dramatic act, was about to begin. When the party reached its climax, Ethan took the stage. He tried to regain his confidence, took the microphone, and began his speech. He talked about the vision and mission of Golden Future, about the innovative tech project that would change the world. He painted a bright and promising future to entice investors. In the front row, Isabella watched him with eyes full of admiration and pride. They were both so immersed in their fantasy of a triumphant comeback that they didn't realize the curtain was about to fall. And today, Ethan said with an excited voice, we have the great honor of welcoming an important investor from Singapore. This collaboration will be the wings that allow Golden Future to soar higher and farther. Just as he was in the middle of his passionate speech, the huge LED screen projecting the company's logo behind him suddenly went black. A murmur went through the hall. Ethan, bewildered, turned around, not understanding what was happening. He signaled to the technical team, but no one responded. And then, to everyone's astonishment, the screen turned on again, but not with the Golden Future logo. The first image that appeared was a clear photo of my face covered in bruises and injuries, my eyes swollen and my leg in a cast. The photo that had been taken the morning after that fateful night. Beside it, in large, clear letters, read, "This is the true face of love." The hall fell into a deathly silence. The background music stopped. Everyone held their breath, their eyes glued to the screen. Ethan's face on stage turned white as a sheet. He pointed at the screen with a trembling hand, stammering, "What is this? Turn it off now." But it was too late. The screen switched to another scene. This time it was a video, a security camera recording, showing Ethan grabbing me by the hair and kicking me in the modest apartment. The quality wasn't excellent, but his cruel and violent actions were undeniably clear. The murmurs in the hall turned into gasps of horror and outrage. My God, what a monster. And he seemed so normal. Isabella, sitting below, was also frozen. She looked back and forth between the screen and Ethan with a panicked expression. The show wasn't over. The screen continued to display photos of Ethan and Isabella together. Happy family photos with their secret son and dense bank statements showing how my $500,000 had ended up in their company. And as a final blow, an audio file played. The sound echoed throughout the hall. It was a conversation between Ethan and Isabella discussing their scam, talking about how they were going to use me as a cash cow. That chick is naive and trusts anyone. She's easy to fool. As soon as you ask for money, she gives it to you without a second thought. Ethan's voice, full of confidence and contempt, boomed through the room. When the recording ended, the hall erupted. The silence turned into a wave of fury. Insults and glares of contempt were directed at Ethan and Isabella. Scammer, monster, bastard. The investors and partners who moments before were listening to Ethan's speech now looked at him like a monster. Some got up and left. Others took out their phones to record. Ethan stood on stage as if struck by lightning. He trembled from head to toe. Everything had collapsed in a matter of minutes. He looked at me from above with eyes full of hatred and desperation. He knew it had all been my plan. It was then that I calmly stood up and walked onto the stage. I took another microphone from the hand of a staff member who was equally stunned. I looked Ethan directly in the eyes and said in a voice that was cold but clear enough for everyone to hear, "Ethan Thompson, your performance was magnificent. But it's time to bring down the curtain." I turned to the audience. My voice gained strength. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am Sophia Sterling, the wife of the man on this stage. What you have just seen is only a small part of the truth. I am not here today to lament my pain, but to unmask a professional con artist and an abuser who hides behind the mask of a successful entrepreneur. I held up a stack of papers. In my hands, I have all the evidence of the scams, embezzlement, commercial fraud, and tax evasion of Golden Future. That innovative project he just talked about is nothing more than a fairy tale to steal your money. Shut up, Ethan roared like a wounded beast. He tried to lunge at me, but my two bodyguards stopped him. He could only struggle desperately and hurl insults. Below, Isabella, realizing the situation was irreversible, tried to slip out of the party, abandoning her lover to his fate on stage. The client appreciation and investor-seeking party had turned into the most humiliating public trial Ethan could have ever imagined. Amid the chaos in the ballroom, as Ethan continued to scream, restrained by the bodyguards, a group of uniformed police officers suddenly appeared at the entrance. Their presence silenced everyone. Leading them was a high-ranking, stern-faced police officer. Accompanied by two agents, he walked briskly towards the stage. People instinctively made way. The officer stopped in front of Ethan and showed him a document with an official seal. Ethan Thompson, you are under arrest for the alleged crimes of fraud, embezzlement, aggravated assault, and commercial fraud. You must accompany us to the station for questioning. Each of the officer's words was like the final hammer blow that shattered Ethan's hopes. He stopped struggling. His whole body went limp, and he stared into space with dead eyes. He knew it was truly over. Two officers approached and handcuffed him. The metallic click of the cuffs closing echoed in the silence like a bell announcing the end of a sinner. No, it wasn't me, it was her, she set me up. Ethan mumbled unconsciously, but no one was listening anymore. He was escorted through the crowd that had once admired and acclaimed him, his head bowed like a defeated dog. The ballroom doors closed, and with them a newly ruined life. Simultaneously, another police team arrived at Isabella Rossi's luxurious apartment. She had just fled the party, and before she could recover from the shock, she was met by justice. Panicked by the situation, and with her advanced pregnancy, Isabella could no longer maintain her previous arrogant and defiant attitude. Faced with the inspector's questions, she quickly broke down and confessed everything. She admitted to planning the scam with Ethan, and that Golden Future was nothing more than a tool for money laundering. To get a lighter sentence, she even handed over all the accounting books, documents, and other evidence she had secretly copied to protect herself. She betrayed her lover without mercy. The drama didn't end there. At the party after Ethan was taken away, his mother, who had attended as the future mother-in-law of the president, couldn't handle the shock. Seeing her beloved son handcuffed and her dreams of wealth vanish like smoke, she screamed and fainted on the spot. People rushed to help her and called an ambulance. She was taken away unconscious. The drama she and her son had so carefully staged ended in a tragedy for their own family. Divine justice is slow, but it arrives. The perpetrator, the accomplice, and the enabler, all who sinned, ended up getting what they deserved. I watched all of this in silence from the stage. In my heart, there was no euphoria of victory, but a strange sense of peace. Justice had finally been served. Grandpa came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "It's all over, my girl." I nodded. A tear rolled down my cheek, but this time it was a tear of liberation. I had passed through the storm, and now before me a clear sky awaited. Over the following days, Ethan's case became the center of media attention. With irrefutable evidence and Isabella's confession, all his crimes came to light. The press dug into his past. How had he gone from being an ambitious young man, from a humble background, to a professional con artist who preyed on rich, naive women, a fake millionaire? Society was horrified and outraged to learn his true face. I, who had been the cruel wife, became an overnight symbol of a strong woman fighting for justice. The previous criticism turned into respect and sympathy. I received countless letters and messages from unknown women telling me that my story had inspired them and given them the courage to leave toxic relationships. I knew my fight was no longer just my own. 6 months later, the trial of Ethan Thompson and his accomplices was held publicly at the New York County Supreme Court. The case received exceptional attention from the public and the media. From early in the morning, the area around the courthouse was packed with journalists and onlookers. I attended the trial as the victim and main witness. I no longer felt fear or anxiety. I was there to face my past and witness justice being done. I wore an elegant white suit and light makeup that conveyed serenity and confidence. As I entered the courtroom, all eyes were on me. I walked calmly to the prosecution's table and sat next to Mr. Davies. In the defendant's box were Ethan, Isabella, and Ethan's mother. Their appearance was pathetic. Ethan was gaunt, with graying hair and sunken eyes. He didn't dare lift his head. Isabella, with a heavily pregnant belly, sobbed continuously. My ex-mother-in-law, in a wheelchair due to the effects of a stroke, had a contorted mouth and could barely speak. Only her gaze directed at me burned with hatred. The trial began. The prosecutor read the indictment detailing all their crimes: domestic violence, fraud, embezzlement, defamation, conspiracy. With each charge, the compelling evidence we had provided was presented: videos, audio recordings, bank statements, witness testimonies. When it was my turn to testify, I took the stand and without hesitation told my story clearly. I spoke of the years of sacrifice, the abuse, the betrayal, and their cruel conspiracy. I did not cry. My voice was strangely calm because I was no longer a victim begging but a survivor demanding justice. When I finished, a deep silence fell over the courtroom. I could read the compassion and indignation in the eyes of the judge, the jury, and the public. When it was Ethan's turn, with his head bowed and in a low voice, he admitted to all the charges. He had nothing left to deny. He only pleaded for a chance to start over, asking for mercy so he could pay his debt to the son who was about to be born. Isabella, crying, blamed everything on Ethan, claiming she had only been seduced by him. She begged for a reduced sentence due to her pregnancy. But the net had been cast, and no one could escape their sins. After several days of trial, the verdict finally came. The judge, an older man with a stern face, began to read the final sentence. This court, after examining all evidence and testimony, delivers the following sentence. The defendant, Ethan Thompson, is found guilty of the crimes of aggravated assault, grand larceny, and defamation, and is sentenced to 20 years in prison. 20 years. Nearly half a lifetime. That was the price Ethan had to pay. Upon hearing the sentence, he collapsed, covering his face with his hands and trembling. The defendant, Isabella Rossi, is found guilty as an accomplice to fraud with mitigating factors of confession and her state of pregnancy, and is sentenced to 7 years in prison. 7 years. Her son would be born and grow up in prison. That was the karma for a woman who had ruthlessly destroyed another's happiness. The defendant, Carol Thompson, is found guilty of the crimes of defamation and accessory after the fact, taking her health into account, and is sentenced to 3 years of probation. The judge's gavel struck hard, ending the entire case. Justice had been done. I sighed in relief. I looked at Grandpa, who was sitting in the audience. He nodded at me silently, with contained joy in his eyes. As I left the courthouse, a crowd of camera flashes was once again directed at me, but this time it wasn't curious questions but words of congratulations. I didn't give any interviews. I just got into the car in silence and drove away from the place that had judged my past. The battle was over, and I was the victor. The trial ended, but its aftermath lingered. Ethan's family life was completely destroyed, but for me and Lily, it was the beginning of a new journey, a journey to heal our wounds and rebuild our lives. Although I had won legally, the psychological wounds, especially Lily's, were not small. The little girl who had witnessed scenes of violence and suffered an abrupt separation had become quiet and fearful. She often woke up at night screaming my name. Seeing her like this broke my heart. I knew that getting justice was only the beginning. Now, the most important thing was to help my daughter regain her smile and innocence. I decided to temporarily set aside all my duties at the group. I wanted to dedicate all my time to Lily. I took her to the best child psychologist in New York. Under the doctor's guidance, I learned to listen to her patiently, to soothe her fears with love and security. Our own healing journey began. I took her on trips to places with blue seas and white sands to majestic mountains. We built sandcastles together, flew kites, and watched sunsets. I wanted to show her that the world besides the dark corners she had experienced was full of beautiful things. We enrolled in art classes, we painted, played the piano, and molded clay. I wanted her to freely express her emotions through colors and notes. Slowly, I saw Lily begin to change. She laughed more, talked more, the nightmares lessened. She returned to being the cheerful, adorable little girl she once was. And in the process of healing her, I was healing myself. Being by her side, caring for her, and loving her unconditionally filled the void in my soul. I stopped dwelling on the past. I stopped hating Ethan. I understood that holding on to hatred would only hurt me more. Forgiveness wasn't because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Besides taking care of my daughter, I started paying more attention to myself. I signed up for yoga and meditation classes. The deep breathing and gentle movements helped me regain balance in my body and mind. I also started reading more books on philosophy, psychology, and the art of living. I realized there were endless interesting things in this world to explore. I stopped closing myself off. I opened up more to friendships. I met up with old friends for coffee and conversation. And I also made new friends in the business world. They were strong, independent women. They showed me other models of happiness. Happiness didn't necessarily have to come from a man. It could come from a career, from passions, and from being one's own master. One day, Grandpa called me to his office. He handed me a folder. Sophia, these are the files for several charitable projects the group sponsors. Take a look and choose the one that speaks to your heart to manage yourself. I think it's time for you to do something for society. I flipped through the pages. There was a project to build schools for children in rural areas, another to build social housing for low-income families. And then my eyes stopped on a project called the Serenity House, a support center for women and children who are victims of domestic violence. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was what I wanted to do. I wanted, through my story, my experience, to help other women in similar situations. I wanted to tell them they were not alone, that after the storm, the sun always shines. The journey of healing wasn't just about soothing the pain, but about transforming that pain into strength, into a purposeful drive. And I had found my way. 3 years. It's not a very long time, but it was enough for the pain of the deepest wounds to subside, and for the storm in my heart to become a serene lake. People often say that time heals all wounds, but I learned that time alone does nothing. Time is just a space. Whether we fill it with healing or let it fester, depends on us, on our will and effort. I chose to fill it with hope. Lily's life and mine had turned to a completely new page, and every word on that page was written with the ink of serenity and laughter. My little angel, who once had to witness the most horrific scene, was now a bright and confident second grader. The trace of fear in her eyes had completely vanished, replaced by a clear, curious, and brilliant joy for life. She no longer woke up, startled at night, or cried at loud noises. Instead, every morning she would hug me tightly, whisper the little secrets of her child's world, and if she fell, she would get up on her own and tell me with a smile, "I'm okay, Mom." Seeing her in her school uniform, her hair neatly combed, chattering about school, I knew my decision to fight to the end had been the right one. I had not only gotten justice for myself, I had reclaimed my daughter's entire innocent childhood. The project I dedicated my most affection to, the Serenity House, had also flourished. What started as a small support center had grown into a solid network and a common home for hundreds of disadvantaged women and children. I was no longer just a sponsor observing from afar, but their sister, their friend, their fellow traveler. Every week I spend 2 afternoons at the center, not to supervise the work, but to listen to their stories. I listened to the story of a single mother who, after 10 years of abuse, bravely escaped with her 2 children. She tells me through tears that my story, which she saw on TV, gave her the strength to leave. At that moment, I thought, she tells me, if she could do it, why can't I? I am a person too, and I deserve to be happy. I listened to the story of a 17-year-old girl who had to drop out of school to be forced into a marriage with a rich but violent man. She arrived at the Serenity House on a stormy night, empty-handed and heartbroken. Now she is back in school, slowly fulfilling her dream of becoming a fashion designer. Every story, every fragment of life I encounter is like a mirror reflecting my own past. I see my reflection in their fear, their pain, and their faint hope. Helping them is my way of healing myself. And I understood once again that the best way to overcome pain is not to bury it, but to turn it into a torch that illuminates the path for others who are lost in the darkness. Sometimes in quiet moments, I would think about Ethan's family. Even though I didn't seek them out, news about them somehow reached me. It was said that Isabella, upon leaving prison, had quietly left the city with her son. She went to a distant town, changed her name, and started a new life. Her son was probably the only reason she had to keep living. My ex-mother-in-law, consumed by grief and illness, eventually died alone in a nursing home. And Ethan, 20 years is a long sentence. He is paying for his sins between cold bars. I no longer feel hatred or satisfaction. The anger of the past has subsided, leaving only an almost cold indifference. They wrote the end of their own lives. The past is the past, like a flood that sweeps everything away, leaving only the sediment of oblivion. I learned to let go, not to forgive them, but to free my own soul. Under Grandpa's gradual guidance, my work at the group was no longer a burden or a challenge. It had become my passion. I proved to everyone, and most importantly to myself, that I could stand on my own 2 feet. I was no longer the chairman's granddaughter. I was Sophia Sterling, the CEO of the Sterling Group, who had navigated a global economic crisis, successfully closed a multi-million-dollar deal with Japanese partners, and expanded the Sterling brand throughout Asia. Professional success gave me financial independence, but my greatest joy remained the simple moments with my family. One weekend afternoon, the sky was clear and the sea breeze was fresh. Lily, Grandpa, and I went on a trip to Nantucket. Instead of a luxury resort, we rented a small beach house with a garden full of bougainvillea. The sunset was slowly falling, painting the sky and sea a golden color. Lily was building a huge sandcastle with other local children. Her crystal-clear laughter mixed with the sound of the waves, creating a symphony of peace. Grandpa and I sat on a wooden bench watching her in silence. Grandpa had aged a lot. His hair was silver white, but his gaze was still lucid, and his smile, as kind as ever, no longer carried the weight of a large corporate group. Now his joy was tending the garden, reading and playing with his only great-granddaughter. "Look at her," Grandpa said, his eyes shining with undeniable happiness. "She's just like her great-grandmother, always cheerful and full of energy." I smiled and rested my head on his shoulder. A thin shoulder, but one that was still my firmest support. "Thank you, Grandpa, for always being there. For giving my daughter and me everything." "Silly girl," he stroked my hair. "You've earned your own happiness. You are the strongest, most resilient person I know." We sat there 3 generations, a family united by bonds of love and sacrifice stronger than blood itself. Just then, a deep, warm voice sounded behind us. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling. Sophia. I hope I'm not interrupting." I turned my heart against my will, beating a little faster. It was Marcus, the talented architect I had met on the Serenity House project. He hadn't come as a partner, but as a volunteer dedicating his free time to repairing and designing living spaces for disadvantaged women. He was a kind, mature, and good-hearted man. He knew my past, but he had never looked at me with pity or curiosity, only with respect and admiration. "Marcus," I smiled naturally. "Out for a walk. Join us." Grandpa looked at us both and smiled mischievously. He stood up, leaning on his cane. "I'm going to see how our Lily's castle is coming along. You two talk." He walked away towards the beach, giving us our space. Marcus sat beside me. We watched the sunset in a comfortable silence, a silence filled with peace and a deep understanding. "You look different today," Sophia, Marcus said suddenly. "You're not the strong vice president from the boardroom, nor the devoted Sophia from the Serenity House." "And how do you see me?" I asked, a little curious. "I see you as very serene, peaceful," he said with sincere eyes like the sea after a storm. I smiled without realizing it. No one had ever said something like that to me. Beside him, I didn't need to pretend to be strong. I could be myself, a normal woman, with her wounds and weaknesses. Our eyes met, and I knew that a new sincere and tender love was beginning to knock on the door of my heart. I was no longer afraid of love. I understood that it's not love itself that hurts us, but loving the wrong person. And I deserved to be loved. I deserved to be happy. I looked towards the horizon where the sun had just disappeared, but the last rays of light still illuminated the sky, bright and hopeful. And I knew that tomorrow, an even more radiant new day would dawn. I don't know what the future holds for me, perhaps a fulfilling love or perhaps new challenges. But for the first time in a long time, I was no longer afraid. I just knew I was ready to embrace it all with open arms. The storm was behind me, and before me there was only blue sky. Dear viewers, after accompanying our protagonist Sophia on her tumultuous journey, it's likely that complex emotions remain in our hearts. We've been enraged by Ethan's cruelty. We've suffered seeing Sophia sink into despair, and we've rejoiced together as she finally rose from the ashes. This story, though fictional, leaves us with very deep and real lessons for our lives. Lessons that can be beacons and strength in the uncertain journey of life. The first and perhaps most profound lesson we can draw: never remain silent or endure in the darkness. Tolerance never brings peace. It only feeds evil to grow. Sophia made the mistake of enduring the violence for a long time. She hoped her silence would bring peace to her family, to her daughter. But reality proved otherwise. Violence, once it starts, never stops on its own. It only intensifies and becomes crueler. Lily's trembling voice, "Grandpa, Mommy's gonna die," was the most costly wake-up call. It teaches us that sometimes salvation comes not from patience but from a small act of bravery. Never underestimate the power of asking for help. We must teach our children and ourselves that when faced with injustice and violence, asking for help is not weakness but the most powerful survival instinct. The second lesson is about the power of change and self-worth. Sophia's life only truly changed when she decided to change. That change didn't just come from designer clothes or the title of vice president. It started from the depths of her being, from the realization that she deserved to be respected, that she deserved to be happy. When you know your own value, the whole world looks at you with different eyes. This story shows us that money and power are useful tools, but they are useless if not controlled by a wise mind and a firm heart. Sophia didn't use money for blind revenge. She used it to acquire knowledge, seek legal support, and transform herself from a victim to the protagonist of her own fight. That is true wealth. And perhaps the most human and profound lesson is how we face victory and heal our wounds. Sophia could have gloated over the downfall of Ethan's family and lived the rest of her life in opulence and comfort, but she didn't. She transformed her pain into compassion and her wealth into a tool to help others in her same situation. The Serenity House is not just a charity project. It's a symbol of rebirth, proof that after the storm, a human being can become stronger and more compassionate. True victory is not when the enemy falls, but when after everything you can stand tall, look at the past with serenity, and move toward the future with an open heart. It's a journey to transform pain into strength, personal misfortune into a value for the community. I believe that everyone, men and women, can find a part of themselves in this story. Perhaps you are going through some pain right now. Perhaps you feel powerless against life's injustice. Remember, you are never alone. Dare to raise your voice, to ask for help, and most importantly, to believe in your own worth. Because the brightest dawn always comes after the darkest night. What do you think of this story? What lesson resonated most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your contribution can be a great encouragement and valuable advice for someone who needs it. Legal disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons, events, or locales is purely coincidental. The content of this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only, with the intention of conveying human life lessons, and does not intend to defame or allude to any real person or entity.